my freedom. Oh, hallelujah.
Together with the nature. Everybody's just considering the holiday show. Go in different directions. Yeah. I'm glad y'all are here. Get some food.
Okay, well, let's do this with David Ashford, Katie. Back in 1963, we were living in California, and we had tried to get fair housing in the city of Berkeley, and the city attorney
No, I'm not going to get statistics. We always get the wrong ones.
We worked past statewide. AB 1240. And then we put up a system, another really. And Michigan was the first city to go to their house.
Give another hand clap for our musicians tonight. David and Roselyn, we so much appreciate you. We know that justice work goes hand in hand with musicians, and musicians lead the way and bring folk together, especially through those songs that you sang tonight. We know that the civil rights movement went forward with that, and we're still fighting that. So thank you so very much.
We're still fighting, but we'll win.
Absolutely. We know it. That's right.
So we were registered voters up in but the city that we were working out of, Blackwood, Louisiana, not the parish. We were in the city. Then Perez invited the co-workers to come out to this parish, and he said he would take us all to court, charges with whatever, and put us out in the court. And the 30 days of water, the 30 days of bread, and we could get out of the city. But we decided we would not out of it. But David had to be in heaven, and I was in Louisville, because they didn't want the interracial couple being in the same city. But we didn't get arrested. We got arrested with the kids who were on the boat coming down to New Orleans for special recreation. And what happened was while they were on the boat, they decided that all the black workers were going to drink out of the white cup, and all the white workers were going to drink out of the black cup. And the captain of the ferry turned it around in the middle of the Mississippi and took them all back to New York to get arrested. So it's better, you know. What they did was take out all the public water fountains so that they didn't have to worry. You know, there used to be water fountains all over the city. Now they're not. That's why.
We believe in victories.
That's
right. That's right. Thank you for being true justice fighters, for all of your work, for being pioneers. Thank you so very much for coming. We're going to get started. Happy New Year, everybody. Good to see everybody back after a little break from Justice and Beyond. My name is Reverend Gregory T. Manning. I'm pastor of Broadmoor Community Church and co-moderator for Justice and Beyond, along with tonight
Sylvia McKenzie, co-moderator with Justice and Beyond.
We have two other co-moderators, that being Trevor Bryan Jr., the second, I want to say, and also Janice Long, who are not with us tonight. As we get started, we always believe that we need to know who's in the room, who are fellow justice fighters who come along to make a difference tonight. And so we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. Take about 10 seconds to tell who you are.
There was a clear example where working New Orleanians owned their own cabs and drove independently, notably at the airport. This was ended by Mayor Landrieu, and this one clear benefit to African Americans and women drivers was lost to big business. At present, the current growth in Airbnbs, called short-term rentals or STRs by those in the know, is happening in African American communities. And increasingly, we have many women and some men homeowners as hosts. As a community coalition that is concerned with the economic consequences of policies made especially that affect African Americans and women, we choose to educate ourselves and to decide what we can support or deny about these proposals.
Lastly, before our speakers speak, on either side of the stage, to my left and my right, there are buckets. Those buckets are for questions that you may have at the question and answer time for our presenters tonight. At any time, if you have a question that comes to your mind, please write it down on one of those index cards that are provided for you. Drop it in the bucket. They will be handed then to one of us so that those questions can be asked. Secondly, again, I must ask you if you would be willing to contribute to our meal tonight. It is very much appreciated in order that we can continue to provide meals for Justice and Beyond. We recommend a donation of $4 to $5 if possible. Also, please, if you have children, we have our children's corner over here. If there is a child that needs some child care, that is there as well, too. We're very happy to have it. Also, very happy to have our students in the audience as well, too. If you're a student, big shout out to you. Thank you for coming tonight. We want more college students, more university students to be involved. in our justice movement. And finally, we want you to know that we, Justice and Beyond, is actively considering and being a part of acting against the Formosa gas plant that is trying to be built along the river in St. James Parish. We're standing against that actively. That gas plant will most certainly put people in dire, affect their health in very drastic ways. And so we must stand together in order to defeat that. And so we ask that you stand with us. And so finally, with no further ado, I think I have nothing else to say. We're going to welcome our speakers tonight and thank you for presenting on this very vital issue. With no further ado, I'll hand it over to you, Andreneica. Tell me your name. Miss Penelope. Penelope. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So, I'm not sure about the format. Are we going to do just questions from the audience?
First, you take about 8 to 10 minutes. Whatever you want to say about the issue, both of you. Let's say 8 minutes if you would. And then we're going to have questions and answers. And again, you write your next questions down and submit them to the audience, please.
So good evening again. My name is Andreneica. I'm with the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. I'm also the Executive Director of Housing NOLA, which is a 10-year process to end the City of New Orleans' affordable housing crisis. What we mean by affordable housing is simply the people of the city living in housing that they can sustain themselves, where they're not spending more than 30% of their gross income on their housing costs. There is study after study after study after study that proves that if you're spending more than that 30% of your gross income on your housing costs, you are housing insecure. You're living check to check. There's not enough money coming in to manage all the bills, and one catastrophe can just set you to spiraling. And unfortunately, in New Orleans, as of the end of 2017, half the people who live in New Orleans are housing insecure. Half of everyone are housing insecure. So half the people in this room are grappling with this, and that's using what is a fairly antiquated and dated data set using 30%. That 30% does not include transportation costs. It does include utilities, but that's a lot, especially when you're talking about 30% of your gross. That's closer to 40, sometimes 50% of your take-home. And unfortunately, in New Orleans, we have some of the highest numbers in the country when it comes to renters who are paying more than half their gross income on their housing costs. About 35% of our renters, who are the majority of the people who live in the city, are spending more than half their gross on their housing costs. So this is a full-on crisis. The only people who disagree with that are people who don't give a damn about it. That's it. There's no other way to put it. This used to be an issue until it got to this point where you had certain people who would pretend that there wasn't an affordability crisis. They didn't look like most of us. A lot of them didn't live here in the city. They didn't call it home. They didn't struggle here with these issues. And so those affordable housing deniers are the enemies of the people of this city. We believe that the affordable housing crisis means we need every solution for every type of problem. That means we need more affordable housing opportunities created first and foremost. We need more homes that are affordable to the average New Orleanians. And that means we need to bring prices down in certain areas. We need to be paying more subsidy, making subsidy more available in certain areas. We need to compel people to create affordable housing near the jobs that make this city go. And we need to be looking at tax breaks and write-offs, and we need to be looking at increasing income. So this is not a one-size-fits-all. There is a number of things that we must do, particularly since this crisis bleeds at every level. When I say half the people are living in the city, of course the people who make $7.25 an hour, the people who are trying to make buy on Social Security, those folks are in the most danger. But there are people who live in the city who make $50,000, $60,000 a year for their households, and they are struggling. There are people who make $60,000, $70,000, and we don't think of those people as struggling, but they do struggle in this city. That is how deep the crisis has gotten. So we need a myriad of solutions. And when it comes to short-term rentals, it is our belief that this can be and should be, and unfortunately hasn't been well utilized as one of the solutions to this problem. Now, we believe that, again, short-term rentals have existed in this city since before Steve Jobs was born. people rented out rooms in their houses. Particularly, again, as a woman of color, I'm very sensitive, as a black woman in the South, I'm incredibly sensitive to the notion that there was a time if I came to visit the city, I couldn't stay anywhere unless I stayed in someone's home. So we're not going to sit here and pretend, and you will never hear us say, our organization say, that short-term rentals are the devil. We don't believe that, we don't say that. We know that there are people who are trying to make ends meet in their own home, and renting out a room in their home, or renting out half of their double, helps them make ends meet. At the same time, there are people who are participating in this, and they're taking advantage of some loopholes in the laws, and they're creating, and they're not paying their fair share. They're not participating in this in the right way. We'd like to see those loops closed. We'd like to see policy that requires, particularly in the commercial area, that affordable housing is created as with using short-term rental as an engine to create more affordable housing. In the CBD, where so many of the people who make the city go can't afford to live. In areas where it's more expensive and there are going to be short-term rentals going there, why not see a one-for-one requirement with every short-term rental and every affordable housing unit? We want to see this as a way of making this city sustainable. So we don't think that it should go away entirely, because we have always committed to the fact that we want to push an agenda that creates more housing opportunities. I used to make the joke when the Avengers, anybody watch the Avengers? The kids are over there, but in the Avengers movie last year, the Infinity Gauntlet, I used to make the joke, if we had the Infinity Gauntlet, we got rid of every short-term rental, that would not guarantee the creation of one new affordable housing unit in the city of New Orleans. And we have to get to the point, we have to, from our perspective as a city, we have to be demanding that our elected officials put housing first, put the people of New Orleans first, and every policy they move forward must, that's related to housing and land use, it must be for the good of the people of the city. It has to. It just has to. We can no longer accept neutral. We can no longer accept, well, maybe we think it might work and it could work. They have to put together policies that will work, that will stem this tide, because the city is going down. And what we say to the operators is that we understand your plight. We understand that you guys, and what we are also concerned about, frankly, is this class warfare, where the lower class and the middle class have been set against each other, and the elite kind of swan off and say, oh, we don't have anything to do with this fight. We're going to sit over here and do what we want. We're very concerned about that perception and that very reality, because that's not going to get us anywhere. Everyone's going to have to give, in my opinion. This is my humble opinion, that everyone's going to have to give, because it's too easy to, we can't let this opportunity slip through our fingers. There have been problems created as a result of the new rules. No one argues with that. We know we need to fix those problems. It's to what extent. And again, we are interested in a solution that creates more affordable housing, more sustainable opportunities for the people who make this city special. Short-term rentals is a tourism operation. It brings people to New Orleans to experience this culture. If the people of New Orleans can't stay here, that business is not sustainable. So it is in the interest of particularly the large commercial operators to make these investments. And unfortunately, the large commercial operators and some of the platforms in particular have expressed no real interest in dealing with this problem. And I'm not talking about the individual operators. I'm not talking about the people who are a part of the city. I'm talking about the large corporate interests that are not here. And they are holding this line that we as the people, and we have to have our elected officials push them on it. So that is where we are. The motion was put forward. We supported the IZD last year because we thought the temporary short-term rental policies didn't make any sense. We have always suggested things. Anybody looks back at our various statements, we have suggested things like caps. We have suggested things like block-based restrictions. We have suggested things like collecting more resources in fees going to create more affordable housing, the one-for-one requirement. We care about making sure that the people of the city have access to affordable housing opportunities. That is our sole concern. That's what we're not going to sit here and talk about short-term rental operators. We're not going to talk about the nuisance to neighborhoods. Not that we don't think that communities need to be safe and safe and wonderful places, but that's not what we're not gonna debate that issue, not from our perspective. I think some people will and do, and they have real legitimate concerns. What we are talking about is how we create more affordable housing and how our city officials put housing first.
Great, thank you. Before we get to you, Penelope, just also to want to state that this forum tonight is being recorded for YouTube purposes. Your faces are not being recorded. Only the presenters on the stage and the moderators are being recorded. But that's just for our purposes so that we can know what we want to keep a record of and what we want to take to City Council as well too. There is a note taker as well too, so that what's said in this room just won't stay here, but that we can make some legitimate change by taking some things that we demand to City Council. So with that said, Penelope, please say your piece.
Well, it's a lot coming behind Andreneica. And I really didn't know that I was going to be giving a presentation. I thought I was going to be more like answering questions. But I'm going to talk from my perspective. I'm 71 years old, and I began developing in the city of New Orleans when I was just out of graduate school. I'm a school social work graduate at Tulane University. And I learned from my parents that if you want to grow wealth, you grow wealth through property. So it was important to me that what I did is I began to try to grow wealth through acquiring and owning property. And that's what I've done throughout my life. I don't have fancy clothes or dress. I don't have fancy cars. I just bought my new one, by the way. But what I do have is I do have property that I have put my life investment in. And I began entering into the short-term rental avenue, I guess, back in 2015. I was having a conversation today with Darryl Durham. I think you saw him on the TV yesterday with the commercial with the councilwoman about how Tremaine has changed. My property is in Tremaine. And I asked him, I said, Darryl, when did you move to Tremaine? When did you come to live in Tremaine? And he said, well, I came right after Katrina. I said, well, you came right after Katrina, and that's right when they tore down all the housing developments. And that's when all the kids left the neighborhood because there were no schools for them to attend. So the families had to go somewhere else, most of them leaving New Orleans. That's when HUD also limited the number of Section 8 housing housing vouchers. So after the projects were done, because I happen to have some Section 8 that I got canceled, but okay, maybe I was just one of them people, I don't know. But the point that I'm making is that the neighborhoods around the city has changed drastically from before Katrina and after Katrina. And those of us that were here before Katrina, that's our neighborhood, before Katrina and after Katrina. And I'm not willing to say that I'm going to give it up because someone has a different opinion of what I'm doing in my neighborhood. I spent my life acquiring property for the purposes of it taking care of me in my retirement. I still spend a lot of money on property because anybody who owns it knows that you must spend a lot of money to maintain it. Andreneica talked about affordable housing. Affordable housing also means a living wage. If I'm not paid a living wage, you can't make a house affordable enough for me. I can't live where I would choose to live, particularly those of us who are in the tourist industry and work in the service area. Those salaries are $8 an hour. And if you work for, and now what many of the hotels are doing, is they're hiring corporations to hire their service workers. So you're making even less than $8 an hour. So now what you're saying is that you come work in this multi-billion-dollar industry, and you who drive this industry are at the bottom of the barrel. The short-term rental owners, and I can speak for myself and everyone in here, we have pledged that the people that work for us will make at least $15 an hour. There's no way to make us. And I have, on a constant basis, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, because when you have people using your property, you have things that happen. So you have to constantly maintain and keep that property usable. So I have these people who are not part of a large contractor. They're everyday John Doe. Robin's been my plumber forever. Eric's been my electrician forever. We grew up together. So I'm circulating that money within my community. I think it is important that we be able to grow and sustain wealth within our community. And the only way you're going to do that is you have to have people in the community who are growing wealth so that they can help with the sustainability of the wealth. Andreneica talked about having to stay in someone's home when she was younger. She's much younger than me. However, I was here before the Public Accommodations Act. We couldn't go anywhere, in any place in the United States, unless we went to share somebody else's space. And we didn't necessarily go in your home because many of us did have more than one place. So what we did is we rented houses out to you. I can remember when I was a child going to stay. We thought that this was the absolute world. My parents rented a house in Waveland. And that was where we went for a whole week to go swimming in Mississippi. We couldn't go to the public beach. We had to rent this house, and that was along the canal. And it was a person who we knew, an African-American person who was renting their house. That's short-term rental in a neighborhood. So what we're doing is short-term rental in a neighborhood. I know my neighbors because I've been in that neighborhood for over 30 years. I don't know a lot of the people who are coming in. I don't know a lot of the people who came after Katrina because they came in with a different purpose. And I hear them now claiming it as their neighborhood. And that gives me pause because you can't claim something. It's just like Columbus discovered America. How did he discover a place where people were already living? Okay? Well, it's just like you can't tell me what is the fabric and what is the culture of my neighborhood that I have been part of for most of my life when you just got here. So to me, I remember someone saying to me that they were reading in Times-Picayune that the person died at 98 years old. They were originally from Chicago. Because they weren't born here, they weren't considered a native. And that's kind of silly, but that's how a lot of people in neighborhoods and in the communities in the city of New Orleans have thought and have felt. So I guess what I'm saying is that it's important to be fair. It's important to share. It is critical that we do something about affordable housing. And I think that short-term rental and whole house short-term rental is contributing to all of this. We're fair. We want to contribute even more for affordable housing. It's upon your elected officials to design a policy that is fair and equitable to everyone. We, as the Alliance for Neighborhood Prosperity, worked diligently with the previous council to try and get something that made sense. It was their decision, in their compromise with the hotels, not to do that. And the hotels, and I know I'm not supposed to be saying these things, people wave me and say no. In the room, in the conference room, the only way we could get to come up with something was to agree to 90 days. Would you start a business that you're only going to operate for 90 days? So it pushes you in a position to violate the regulation. Then what you did is you created people who didn't get licenses. And so when you talk about you're going to have bad actors, those people who don't have licenses and are not on the radar, you're going to have bad actors. Then you're going to have some others that are bad actors, but you're not collecting enough money in terms of enforcement to be able to take away the bad actors. So there's a whole lot that was wrong with the first legislation. There's a whole lot that's wrong with the one that's been introduced right now. So we were asked, and Andreneica was there with us last week in a room, to sit down and go through the legislation and choose what was right. And the only thing I had come up with is that they want to do something about a greater contribution to the NIP, which is the money that goes to affordable housing.
Thank you very much, Ms. Penelope. We will get to your favorite part so you can answer some questions. And thank you both for reminding us that this short-term rental thing is nothing new. That it's been going on a long time, and we've had it here and been doing just fine. And we're going to continue to have it, and we're going to can't let people steal it away as well too. So we're going to get to some questions. You all have submitted those questions. Keep them coming. What we really want to know too is what we need to take back to City Council, what this body agrees to take back so that we can make some change. All right. Also, do I need to ask, is there a representative from Councilman Palmer's office here tonight? If you are, please make yourself known.
Oh, okay.
Okay, first question. Right. Yeah.
From the city STROs. This one is 1,800 license holders were emailed a questionnaire survey. 353 responded. 72% lived in Orleans Parish. 62% were women. 32% were African American. How can we limit out of state but incentive? Who wrote this one? The host for this one. Incentive lots to share. Okay, locals, it look like continue to share tourism industry.
So yeah, I mean the question is, how can locals, because part of the problem is, and when you hear this from some people, particularly when you hear the neighborhood concerns, you hear people talking about, it's not just a short-term rental problem, that's also a problem with long-term rentals, right? It's absentee landlords, absentee managers, people who don't have to live with the consequences of how people conduct themselves on the property in the neighborhood. So it is our understanding, and again, we're not lawyers, but we have been told by the city attorney, by folks that there's not a way to say that someone who lives in New Orleans can have a short-term rental license and someone who doesn't live in New Orleans cannot. That it's unconstitutional, it's against full faith and credit. There was a suggestion made that you could do something similar to hunting licenses and state college tuition and have different levels, have different costs, so that locals pay one fee and that you have a different fee for out-of-state people. And again, so one of the concerns around that is a lot of people put properties into LLCs, and again, what the compromise has to be is that if you cannot prove that you own it, right, if you've done a complicated structure, one LLC is one thing, but an LLC and a holding company and another holding company and another holding company, and you're someone along the chain saying, I own this with a Louisiana license, then you won't get to do it, right? You have to be the person who actually owns the property. And again, that's one way to do that. It's not, that's the question was, I'm going to answer honestly about as much as I know, there is a way to do that. It's complex, and it may be something that might encourage bad actors or discourage. There's not going to be a solution that's going to make everybody happy. And it is my belief that the best compromise has everyone a little unhappy as they walk away from the table, because it means everybody gave something. And so again, as we look at these answers, it's going to be who do we want to win? Who do we want to win?
Well, I know who I want to win. I want the citizens of New Orleans to win. That's what I want. So we're all citizens. We're all in this together. To just elaborate a little bit on Andreneica's comment as it relates to licensing. The hunting license not only determines if you get one and how much it costs, but it also determines how many things you can kill. So what I was suggesting to the council is that they found a way on the state level for a hunting license that has restrictions based on whether or not you are a Louisianian or not. And so what I'm asking them to do is look at the licensing permitting the same way for short-term rental, for whether or not you are a New Orleanian or not. And as Andreneica pointed out as well, anything you do that's going to be policy is going to be difficult if you do it right. The easy way out is to say, I'm just going to shut it all down and do nothing. And I'm hoping that the council doesn't take the easy way out. I'm hoping that they really dive into being as thoughtful as they can and studying and looking at this issue specifically for our community. When you form a hypothesis, you go out and look for the research that is going to substantiate your hypothesis. So if your hypothesis is that whole house short-term rental is bad, you go out and you find the research to support that. But if your hypothesis is that short-term rental, whole house, home sharing, and commercial can in fact grow wealth within the community, the local community, and can in fact grow wealth in the city, you can go find that.
If we invested our retirement income and wages in a legal licensed home, and we are paying into a NHIF fund, shouldn't we be allowed to be grandfathered in and continue?
I mean, that was, again, that's what people would want. Again, that's not required. The law changes every day. We currently live in a country where we pay federal taxes, where our government is shut down, and we may end up building a wall with that money. It doesn't stop us. It doesn't mean we have to stop paying federal income tax. That's just not how the rules work. So that's the answer to the question, is that those are how the rules work. A program is allowable today, it's disallowed tomorrow. And it doesn't have to be like that, but the question was, can they? Of course they can be, that's a decision, but should is a decision, right? It's of course they can change the rules, and of course they don't have to.
And I was going to say, yes, it can be grandfathered in, provided that the rules allow for that. So it's kind of like how you develop the policy. You can do it to be inclusive, or you can do it to be exclusive. We'll see how it goes.
Ms. Penelope, this is directed at you. What about neighborhoods that are overrun with tourists and your neighbors can no longer afford to live in your neighborhood? And the second question is, what about people owning and renting houses who don't live in New Orleans, and there is no one on porches who know your kids and family who are not involved in local issues?
I'll answer the first one first. Okay, repeat that one.
The first one is, what about neighborhoods that are overrun with tourists and your neighbors can no longer afford to live in your neighborhood?
I can speak for my property. I did not put anyone out in order to have short-term rental. As they moved out, and I can say to you, the first group that moved out is I had a group of young women who came in to do the Teach for America. And once that funding ran out, they all went back home. And at that time, I made a decision to renovate that property. If you have 6 women living in a house, it could be a bit of a mess. And I decided to renovate that property, and at that point, made it a short-term rental. the neighborhood in Tremaine has a significant influx of short-term rental properties. I think that what we need to look at is those players that are causing problems. Because you have a tourist walking through your neighborhood doesn't make it a bad neighborhood. I live across the street, and my property is across the street from St. Augustine Church. The grave of the unknown slave is there all day and night. There are tour buses, there are bicycle riders, there are scooters, there are wagons, there are walking tours. That's there every day. Has nothing to do with the fact that I have 2 short-term rentals across the street. They're there. I have 2 other properties that are across the street from Armstrong Park. There are concerts in the park all during the year. If you sit on the porch, you can hear the music. There are people coming in and out of the park that walk up and down St. Philip Street. They're parking on St. Philip Street to go to the park. That has nothing to do with our short-term rentals. So when you look at that neighborhood is a tourist attraction neighborhood. On the next corner is the Tremaine Center. The Tremaine Center has events constantly. On the other corner is Craig School. So I'm surrounded with people who are visiting in and out of that neighborhood, who don't live in that neighborhood. The persons who own businesses in that community have all said to me, I go to the Tremaine coffee shop, I go to Padamon's, I go to Little Disney's, and they have all said what a significant impact this has made on their small businesses by having those visitors in the neighborhood. So, again, if you have someone that is not acting appropriately and they're abusing their privilege of having a license of a short-term rental, that's where enforcement comes in. That's why we need more money in enforcement so that something can be done. The New Orleans Police Department has really no records of any obstructive behavior from short-term rental guests. So there's nothing that really substantiates the complaints. And I find that a little bit ironic that the complaints are so loud, but there's no police record to substantiate it.
There you go.
People don't call the police on things like that, particularly now, in this day and age when you're worried about, living while black, calling the police for your neighbors being loud. I mean, we can say the same thing about Section 8. And you're right, there are concerns about where this works. I mean, that's why one of the things that is good about this policy is that they're talking about making changes to how these properties are being monitored. The city doesn't have, and has never been interested in spending a lot of money on a big robust program. Because frankly, we don't want to spend our money. I don't want to spend my tax dollars monitoring tourists. We have enough.
We offered the city through our association to pay for some of the crime cameras to put into the neighborhoods so that can help deter some of the activity that's been going on. That offer was not accepted to my knowledge, was it, Eric?
No,
But it's in this current policy that there will be cameras on the building.
And there are people that are complaining about that.
Again, who do you want to win?
Everybody has a little piece of
everybody
the
can
say.
win.
Everybody can't win.
Yes, it can.
Yeah, everybody can win some part. Everybody.
In a perfect world, everybody can win, but it takes a lot of compromise.
Well, that's exactly right.
I don't want out-of-town corporations to win at the expense of people in the city.
Well,
And that's the choice with a lot of those conversations.
Amen.
I don't want people who have interest in leveraging the city and its people to win, because when they win, we lose.
But those people who run those hotels, that is out-of-town corporations.
Absolutely.
They're winning.
Right.
So now they're going
No, exactly. We can start pushing the tide back. We can start.
Appreciate the conversation. Listen, we got 8 questions. We have 8 questions right now. We have 8. We have 8 questions, And we have 20 minutes to answer them because Andreneica has to leave at 6:10.
That's okay.
We appreciate it. We're going to try to get to these 8 questions. So divide about 20 minutes by 8.
Okay, this is things. Airbnb has become a benefit to many neighborhoods by keeping it cleaner. No old cars, no loitering. After some purchase a home, pay to renovate, pay increased taxes and maintenance costs. How can you expect an owner to change an amount for rent that a lower income person can afford?
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But you have to, that's assuming that that was already low-income property.
Right.
You see, because many of those properties didn't exist. The ones that you see new built, that was vacant lots, or it was dilapidated property.
But we also have to talk about the fact that there are a lot of people, and again, I speak more globally. Penny is coming from the perspective of her personal experience, and I'm certainly not going to sit here and attack Penny because I know how she's conducting her business. But I'm talking about globally. There are bad actors who are overcharging for properties that aren't worth and they're long-term renters and they are short-term renters. So yes, there's wiggle room. There are prices that are being sustained. Artificiality has been introduced in this market in a ridiculous way. Yeah. The market is not connected to what the people of the city make. The fact that the average home sales price is $227,000 and the average income in the city is $36,000 is stupid.
Yes, it is. But there was a study about that in 2006, and y'all didn't do anything in 2006. But you didn't do anything in 2000. That study came out in 2006.
Tracy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So again, that's today. Those are the numbers today. It's not connected to reality. And again, that does not mean that everybody has that people have to all of a sudden just take $2,000 less or $1,000 less. It means we have to be thoughtful. It means we have to say to the people of the city, because again, for those of you where this is an investment, if the people of the city are not here, your investment isn't going to be worth anything. They're not coming to see Armstrong Park just because of its artifice. They're coming to see the artists in it, the people of this community. That's why they come here. That is why this investment is there. You're not building an investment opportunity in Cleveland. You're building an investment, a tourism investment. You're plugging into a tourism economy that is dependent upon the people of the city. And we have to take care of those people. We have to. The people of this city first. That means some of the operators and the owners. They are not the devil.
You're absolutely right. We're not. But let me say this to you too. You know, the last project that was just approved, and Beverly, you can help me with this, at the New Orleans Convention Center, the money there was going to provide, there was a requirement to provide some affordable housing. The council took that requirement out because they said that the rich people didn't want to live with those poor people.
I can tell you what exactly happened. Council member James Gray, who's no longer on the council, said that he thought it was ridiculous to have that requirement. And I mean,
But the requirement is gone.
No, the requirements were removed from that one project.
Well, it's gone from the project I'm speaking of.
Yeah, the project hasn't even started though. I mean, and we can get that project back in the wrong. We fought that fight. I mean, again, we stand up and show up for all of those fights. I was in the council room that day, and it passed unanimously. And if we want to have that conversation with Councilmember Jason Williams, because he was on the council then, and he's on the council now, and he voted for it, and Councilmember Jared Brostad, he voted for it, he's still on the council. Then Councilwoman Latoya Cantrell, who's now the mayor, who also voted for it. It passed unanimously. It didn't pass 4-3 or 5-2. It passed unanimously. And we stood up in that room that day and condemned that council for making that decision. It was done. The community stood up. Every single community person in that room. People were there that day to go over the master plan amendment. And every single person who found out, because they did it at the very last moment, they stood up and they said this is a disgrace to that city council. And they voted for it anyway. And so again,
the same thing happened when they tore the housing development down. We had city council members throwing kisses out.
yeah, one city council member, but yes, we had that
city council
conversation was more complicated than that because you also had community members on both sides of that issue.
No,
They tore down all the houses.
No, you
when
did,
they
let's
made
not
us,
recreate history.
because the housing is gone.
Order.
Let's not recreate history.
The next statement. Mention the Airbnb issue before the city council this Thursday at 11 a.m. And it would be of great importance as many of our colored American people to be there as well.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the same thing. So please don't take no offense. We have to show up in numbers. We sit at home on the front porch talking, but when it's time to show up, it's just a handful of us. When are we going to stand up? I'll stand up every time there's an issue at City Hall, stating that we are the soul of this city. Without us, you have no New Orleans. But when are we going to stand up and take what belongs to us back?
That's right.
We here to educate, to help, whatever you need us to do, we here. But people, let's do this for ourselves and for our grandchildren. If we do nothing else, show up January the 10th. Not at 11 a.m. Get there for 9 so you can mingle and talk and see who you need to meet. Whoever you may need to take your frustration out before the actual meeting starts. One thing we don't want to do is pee off anybody sitting on a seat with a gavel. So we got to learn, as citizens of New Orleans, you're not going to take nothing from us. You're only going to do what we allow you to do. No more, no less. Are we sick and tired? Are we?
Yeah.
Let's show up January the 10th at 9, no later than 10 a.m. and do our due. New Orleans people, everybody want to be here. Where can you go since Katrina that show love that New Orleans people show? Where can you go at anybody place outside of New Orleans and feel a warm feeling of welcoming in that home when you walk? Nowhere. So let's stop making excuses and let's start making a stand. Now I can go on with the next question. Okay. It was mentioned about a letter, Ms. Roselyn.
Yeah.
Which letter are you speaking
The one
of?
that they said that they sent out there, when we didn't get it.
I didn't get it.
It was a survey.
I didn't get one. I don't know anybody who got
So they
one.
only got 300 back. but
Well, what we need to do, again, January the 10th, come back.
Who authored the letter? Who was the
Send
letter
out the
from?
survey.
A survey sent out by,
Survey was sent out from the Alliance for Neighborhood Prosperity to 1,700 temporary whole home license holders using the city's website information. 1,700 emails went out, 353 respondents responded to the survey.
oh, okay.
So it was sent out by your organization?
So the 1,700 was not an exhaustive list. There was more folks that it could have been sent out. You chose to send out the 1,700.
Well, no, we chose to
The
set
city-
out
the city
the number
database.
of people who were short-term rental, temporary license holders.
Okay.
What we're trying to do is get information on what is the mixture of those persons who are New Orleanians, what is the racial composition of those persons. We were trying to get that information, and that was why that survey was limited to just those persons who were registered through the city of New Orleans for a license,
Okay,
have a temporary whole home license.
okay, so those who fit those parameters were sent.
What was
Okay.
the parameters?
Let's move to the next thing.
Clarification on that.
That's what,
That one was still in the letter.
so some people have been left out.
Okay, a quick question. Will any more letters be given
Did
to?
anybody here get that
Well,
letter?
it was a survey.
Well, survey.
Okay, did anybody get the survey?
Yeah. So there isn't, not to my knowledge, Eric, can you speak to that on Margaret, whether or not there's a plan for any additional surveys?
We're calling upon city council to actually use their own data and for a city permitting office to conduct that study. A lot of people are leery of responding to a survey, so if you're going to answer your age, your sex, your race, which is why even 352 over 1,700, that's majorly statistically relevant, but we only got 300 respondents. 500 could have gone to spam or junk or bounced back. Could have been incorrect emails because we used a city database, so that could have been wrong.
And it's coming from a private organization versus coming from a city government. So if you're getting something, the city could find this information out just as easily if they wanted to. They prefer hearing from Apollo, people who supposedly speak for the black community. Instead, but the city could do this. But if you rely upon an LJI or anybody else, then folks are going to say, oh, well, it's coming from Louisiana Justice Institute. We know where they stand. Or it's coming from Andreneica's group. We know where they stand. The city has chosen not to do this survey on its own, and that's frustrating.
Based on our community meeting, we know the percentage of African American hosts in the city is much higher than that 32%. We think it's closer to 50%, but we can't quantify it without the city itself.
And we need to push for the city to do their own survey.
Absolutely.
Demand it.
Okay, who will enforce the rules? We have a huge problem with code enforcement, and people are cheating already. With the code enforcement with the properties, like
Not actually doing.
But it's going to be worse because as I hear 311 and 911 are going to merge together, right? So it's really going to go down the drain.
So, I have an empty lot next door to one of my properties that I clean up. And I can't tell you how often this guy who owns it lives in Atlanta. This guy who owns it lives in Atlanta. They don't use our First Amendment code enforcement. You think they do anything about it? No. So the answer to that question is you're not going to get anything better than what you've been getting unless they're willing to finance it.
Right, but we have to, that's the other thing. We do have pots of money that can pay for robust enforcement. And so when she was Representative Moreno, Councilwoman Moreno secured a portion of the taxes that go to the state for short-term rentals. That comes back to New Orleans only for enforcement. There's a good chunk of money. There's actually more money in that pot than there has been accumulated for affordable housing. As a matter of fact, easily about 5 times what we've gotten there. And it's been sitting there because there's not an enforcement tool necessary design that can afford that. The state is saying that they will not give the city of New Orleans this money unless the city proves that it's expended this kind of money. The city collects a lot of money with the fees that it's already charging to cover the office that they have right now. And as a matter of fact, I believe one of the motions that were filed today is a motion designed to create a wraparound services. That's another reason why we are, one of the things that we like about the current proposed legislation that it drastically increases the amount of money available. It's not enough. We can't simply look to short-term rentals. We have to look to short-term rentals, but that's not enough. And to the question that was asked earlier, is this the only thing on our agenda? Absolutely not. We have to be looking at the hotels. We have to be looking at other businesses to make their appropriate investment. We need to be looking at residential developers who are putting up cranes in the sky. And again, we focus more, most of our combativeness is around the commercial pieces where you have people who are overbuilding for an oversaturated luxury market that doesn't exist here. It's not connected to us in any way, shape, or form. And they think short-term rental is going to be what bails them out. And that is one of the things that we hold the line in the sand. And it's our opinion sometimes that those forces use the small operators, use the women of color, the men of color, the people of this city as shields. And that's why we want to have this conversation about bifurcating it. We have to be able to have that conversation. That's why I asked the question, who do you want to win?
Okay, I have a statement that I need to read.
Expand just 1 second on that. Also, we have to be careful that because these developers have come in and they're overbuilding, that they're not going to use short-term rental by removing it from the locals who are doing short-term rental. Removing it, taking us out of the play so that there's more opportunity for them to be able to finance their developments.
It's just splitting black communities, splitting black women, and trying to pit us against each other. And the fact that we're having this conversation with I'm a down black woman. I'm not a down black woman. I wear red heels. I don't wear red heels. I wear tennis shoes. Screw it.
Tracy, I can't do that.
Okay.
because I have other people, I have to respect them that I'm stopping.
Okay,
Please.
sorry, you know me.
Thank you. We got our back. All right, this is a statement. I don't have a question. I actually have a statement. I am so very disappointed in our leadership, particularly the city council. Instead of them focusing on the crime and the raggedy streets that we drive on, they are picking on the poor people that's trying to make an honest living. STR is helping people to make their ends meet. I hope that the council will not be successful in making any changes. And that was the statement. January the 10th, 11 a.m.
Everybody agrees, though, that there are problems. You heard Penny say that there are problems with the current legislation. The current legislation makes 90 days temporary. That doesn't make any sense. There have to be changes.
But the main issue with that, with the STRs too, I wanted to mention, it starts from federal. After Katrina, they were telling homeowners to go up $300 on the rent to keep us from coming back, or to use up the little rental money they was giving us quickly, so we wouldn't have anything. So we, I know Austin Badon spoke on something with that issue. So we have to go all the way to the state as well to see about rent control. Then maybe we can do some control with this.
Well, that's a constitutional issue.
Yeah, where it goes further.
I mean, we can't, that's a long-term conversation. If the state of Louisiana, if the entire state of Louisiana voting to do rent control, we can, this is the thing that we always talk about. The people of this city can save, we can save ourselves. This isn't Atlanta, this isn't San Francisco, this isn't New York. This is a city with a 20% vacancy rate. There's enough room for all of us. There really is. So why are we in the middle of the affordable housing crisis? We can't keep fighting over these scraps when there are other opportunities. We can do this correctly. And we do need to have a long-term plan, but we can't let the long-term plan get away from the short-term gain. We have to make some changes today, tomorrow, next year, put more money on the street, for more housing, better rules to protect as many people as we can protect. And that's how we build it. And that, I mean, I agree with you totally, we do need to do that, but that, same thing with changing wages. That's a multi-year down the road conversation. We have people struggling today. And we can do things for them today that does not have to imperil other people, other New Orleanians. This zero-sum game, we talked about this earlier, pitting the lower class and middle class against each other. That's how the other people win. Everybody's got to give on this.
And this other one, speak to grandfathering in the current STR owners. We need to show that real local owners are ambassadors for the city.
So I know that there's another motion filed today that wanted to examine, there's a study that's being recommended to look at grandfathering and looking at economic incentive zones and things like that. So that is also going to be up for debate on Thursday.
Has anybody considered requiring the big hotels to set aside 10% of their housing, of their rooms, for the homeless?
They don't sound so set aside for anything.
I know, but that doesn't stop us from asking.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Andreneica said, you know, the things that, in response to your comment, that these are things that go down the road. Y'all have been going down the road forever. When do we bring them here? You know, and again, my belief is that as you grow wealth in your community, you grow power. I'm not going to let them take away my power.
That's the core of racism, taking away power. And this issue at the heart of it is racism as well, too. And we got to look at the systematic displacement of the people in our city that's happening very rapidly, putting the workers out of the city, being able to find housing. What we want to move to first, we want to give you guys, both of you ladies, 2 minutes to kind of just wrap it up, and then we'll move to some future action that we want to take and come up with some demands that we want to take to City Council. So please, 2 minutes each.
So thank you guys for having me tonight. I enjoyed coming to Justice and Beyond, and I just want to remind everybody that we want to put together strategies always that put housing first, that put the people of this city first. This is not impossible, and that's the thing that I want to leave everybody with. That is how we are defeated time and time and time again. By the fact that it's going to be complicated, the fact that it's going to be hard. The fact that we can't expect our elected officials to do what we need them to do. That defeatist thinking is what puts us in the trick bag every single time. That has us kicking the can down the road. We need to start, we have to demand with each and every decision. That's why I can name for you and tell you who voted how and who voted when. And that's why we talk about holding our elected officials accountable. We are not, it has become too serious. It is with half the people in the city of New Orleans being cost burdened. This is no longer a joke. This is no longer a game. This is not something that we can accept lip service on. And so again, there is not a black and white answer. I wish that there was. I wish there was some boogeyman that we could just point to and say, J'accuse, you are the reason, terrible landlord, terrible developer, short-term rental operator, homeless person who won't take the crack pipe out of their mouth. It's easy to demonize. But more often than not, those are community members. Those are people who are precious. And we have to stop doing that. We have to look at the real enemy. We have to look at the real challenge. And it is, exactly like Penny said, is the loss of power in this community. And we have to take it back. And we have to, again, hold that line with our elected officials and say, if you are not for me, then what are you doing there? Thank you all.
Much I can add to that, other than, first of all, I appreciate being invited to come and speak before you. I look for opportunities to speak in the area of short-term rental because of the fact that I have seen what it has done to the Treme community. There has been, in my opinion, more good than it was bad. I have been part of Treme for many years. Treme was overridden with drugs, drug dealing, blighted property, and it's a different look now. It is a different look. So there's good players like me who live in the community and keep their properties and make sure that there are no bad actors in the properties that I have. And there are bad players. So we need to, what I would suggest is that each of you walk your neighborhood. So that it's not somebody telling you what's going on in your neighborhood. You walk your own neighborhoods and look at what's going on in your neighborhoods. I was given a citation for a property that they said I owned. And I got back with code enforcement and I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, we're going to send you a picture of your property. It wasn't mine. It wasn't mine. So my thought is that of the complaints that come in, how many are really real? I'm just one. And I'm there and I'm making sure it's right, it's operating right. And then you send me a letter saying that you're going to revoke my license because of a violation, and it wasn't my property. So I'm just suggesting, walk your neighborhoods and validate for yourself what's going on in your communities. Don't let somebody paint a picture for you based on what it is that they want. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your appreciation. Ms. Penelope, thank you for being with us tonight and sharing the wealth of information.